And we've also learnt in the course of the campaign that if Liz Kendall hadn't been a politician, she would have been a dancer, which she did for 14 years. But as it's radio, I don't think we'll ask for a demonstration.
Good. I don't think my knees are up to it.
OK, mine neither. OK, let's begin with the callers now. And we're going to start with Ben Cahill, who's ringing from Oxford. And Ben, I don't think you're a member of the Labour Party.
No, that's right. I'm not, no.
Oh, far ahead with your question.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Ben.
Hello. My question's one about narrative, really. Jeremy Corbyn's narrative, however practical it may or may not be, appears clear and is evidently very appealing to some. I was wondering what your narrative is and how it's distinctive from the other leadership contenders or, say, from the current government itself.
Well, I think what drove me into politics and my understanding to be Labour's next leader and Prime Minister is because I want us to win power in order to give it away. I don't want to wield power over people's lives. I want to make sure that people can take power and control over their own lives. And I think that means they need the skills, knowledge, networks, chances and choices to deal with this world that's changing so fast around them. I feel very angry that so many people are written off or held back just because of where they're born, what their parents did, their gender, sexuality and the colour of their skin. And we've got to think in new ways about how we give people opportunities to take control over their own lives.
Ben, does that sound distinctive enough to you?
It sounds very much like you need to win the power in order to then give it away, I suppose, or to devolve it to whoever you see fit. But I don't know how easy it is to translate that message, I suppose, in relation to the other leadership contenders. It seems a very noble and quite sensible thing to do, but I suppose it's quite hard to pitch that in terms of tangible benefits for what people will see as a result of Liz's leadership.
Well, I always think that decisions are best taken not for people but with and by people, and I want to see a whole range of things from skills, housing, transport, infrastructure not taken by the man or indeed woman in Whitehall. I think they should be taken by our cities, towns and counties. But I want to go further. I want to see communities and families have more control over their lives. We actually emerged as a party from ordinary people coming together in trade unions, co-ops and mutuals. And as I've been travelling the country, I have been really inspired by seeing how tenants can take over running and managing their housing estates, how community energy schemes where people have control over the renewable energy that they have, and where families who are caring for their loved ones, when they're given more say about their services, change the way they're provided to help give them, a better life. And it's that kind of putting power in people's hands that really drives me.
Ben, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's us travel around the country a little bit now and go to Glasgow and speak to Diane Risby. Diane, you're through now to Liz Kendall.
Thank you. My question is, if Jeremy Corbyn becoming the Labour Party leader is a threat to its future, should Liz, Yvette or Andy, or any two of the above, not withdraw from the leadership contest to deny him a victory and sacrifice their own personal ambition for the greater good?
I've had this question asked a lot over the last couple of days, and I'm not going to be withdrawing from this contest. I love my party too much to see us lose again, and I'm going to continue making the case for the changes that I think we need. We've got to understand why we lost the election. I don't think we've discussed that enough in this leadership debate, why people didn't trust us on the economy or with their taxes, and why we didn't have a vision that everybody could feel part of.
Were you approached, though, by Lord Mandelson, or was anybody in your team approached by Lord Mandelson?
Neither me nor anybody in my team, no.
Oh, so the story in today's Daily Telegraph?
I have no idea where that came from.
There have been discussions, though, haven't there, between you and other teams about the idea of you dropping out and making a clearer field for the candidate who's most likely to stop Jeremy Corbyn?
I haven't sort of made that proposal, and none of the other candidates have made it to me. I have said that obviously I want people to vote for me with their first preference, but that they should use their second and third preferences for Yvette or Andy or Yvette. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to say who I'm going to be backing in second or third preferences. And I just want to urge any Labour Party members or supporters who are thinking about voting is vote for who you believe will be the candidate who's best placed to win for Labour in 2020, to win back those seats in the south, like Watford, where I grew up, because unless we do that, we can't form a government and put our principles into practice.
But you really think there haven't been discussions about any of the candidates?
No, I haven't. You know, I'm not going to be dropping out in this contest. I can't stop making the case. You know, I believe that we need a credible Labour government that can actually win and beat the Tories and kick them out and form the next government.
Stuart has tweeted us, given your minimal odds of success, how do you maintain Well, you yourself have said you're way
know.
behind.
I'm a long shot.
He wants to know, how do you maintain motivation?
I suppose that... I love I think our party has been the greatest champion of equality and opportunity this country has ever seen. The huge achievements we've had, whether that's the NHS, civil partnerships, maternity and paternity pay and leave, the minimum wage, Sure Start, all of those things we achieved in government. And I've seen the results in my own constituency, how we transformed people's lives. And, you know, I'm not a religious person. And I suppose being this feeling of duty about giving people, you know, an equal chance at life is what drives me. It's how I make sense of my existence, really. It's what motivates me. And I feel a very strong sense of duty and responsibility to speak out for the things I believe in.
Let's go back to Diane now. And what's your view about whether any of the candidates should drop out?
Well, all of the candidates have said that they care deeply about the Labour Party, and it just seems to me to make numerical sense that any one of them would have a better chance on their own than all three who are perceived to be either on the moderate or the right-wing branch of the Labour Party. The other thing that I would like to sort of see is that there's been a lot of emphasis on credible and electable, but when Gordon Brown was speaking yesterday, he did also mention radical, and that's something that seems to be missing a bit from the proposals of the other candidates.
I think you're right. People really want something different. They don't want to keep on doing or saying the same things over the next 5 years as we've been doing over the last. And I think this idea of radically devolving power and control and giving people far more say over the decisions that really affect their lives is a big difference from where we were, certainly when we were last in government and over the last 5 years. But if you were to ask me what my absolute priority would be, it is to end the inequalities that emerge before children even start school. Children in my constituency start school on average 15 months behind where they should be in terms of their development. They play catch up for the rest of their lives, and they will never be able to fulfil their potential unless we end that. So I don't want to see an inheritance tax cut for the few, as the Tories are proposing. I want to see that money put into a revolution in support for parents with new babies. I used to be director of the Maternity Alliance charity, and, you know, we looked at how you could really transform those life chances. And, you know, I believe that the Labour Party should be all about education, social mobility, and giving everyone an equal shot at life. And that's my real priority.
Well, interesting that you mention education, because we're going to move on now to Peter Rees, who's calling in from Winchester in Hampshire. And I think you're a former head teacher, Peter.
Former primary head teacher and an trained early years practitioner.
So what's your question to Liz Kendall?
Liz, hello.
Hi, Peter.
My question is to do with your position on free schools. I was at your hustings in Brighton a few weeks ago, which was extremely interesting, when you said in relation to my question then about free schools that there was no accountability. There needed to be a level playing field. There needed to be a focus on early years, which I see is in your statement that's dropped through my door today, and that education is at the heart of the manifesto. The government has pumped £50 million pump priming for capital into free schools and a further £48 million in revenue costs. But Ofsted puts the failure rate at least 3 times that of state schools.
So could we move towards a question, Peter?
Can you say exactly what your position on free schools is and why you think they should exist?
Well, Peter, what I've said is that if a school is providing a good education for children, whether it's a local authority, academy or free school, If we're elected in 2020, I don't think that we should close that school. We need far more accountability in the system, as I've said before. But you'll know, as a former head teacher at a primary school, my mum was a primary school teacher herself, that what really makes a difference in schools is having an inspiring head, is having great teachers, is having a curriculum that can inspire children and open their eyes and their minds to the opportunities that exist in future, and that parents are more fully involved. We know that the difference parents make to their children's education and the outcomes is far greater than the difference between the best and the worst performing schools. So I want us to get away from this obsession with structures, actually.
Structures don't matter? Peter?
Well, Liz said on the 21st of May that she wasn't going to waste time about obsessing over school structures. And I just think it's incredibly important that these schools who don't have any accountability, they're not transparent, they're not open, they don't have proper maintenance of standard, are brought back into the public control through local authorities. It's not a question of closing them or doing anything else, but it's the way that they're funded. I know perfectly well from colleagues that nearly £100 million over 5 or 6 years pumped into primary education and early years would have made an awful lot of difference rather than free schools that are failing.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Peter. I'd like to move on now. We're going to go to Bolton and to talk to Andy Lonsdale. And you used to be a Labour Party member, but they lost you. So explain to us what happened.
Well, I used to vote Labour when I was younger. I've always worked all my life, and then eventually I decided to try to go through self-improvement. And as I did, I became very much disillusioned with the Labour Party. I found I'm having to pay for courses that people on benefits got for free and didn't study on. I eventually passed my course, unlike a lot of those. That, I had to work 2 jobs to pay to go on the course and live at the same time and pay a mortgage. Then I started working in social housing, and I found out people are still better off than me, despite the fact I've gone through a high level of improvement on myself. And yet, no matter what I did, I was still not as well off as people on benefits.
So what's your question to Liz Kendall?
What's she going to do to make people like myself, who've now gone over to UKIP, to be absolutely honest, come back to Labour?
Thanks for that, Andy. And actually what you've just said there, I've heard in many places, including my own constituency, but places across the country. And just recently I was in Cardiff and met a man actually who'd been Labour all his life. He was 84, and his wife, the last election, he voted UKIP and she'd voted Conservative. And when I asked her why, she said, Labour isn't the party of work. And it was like an icy hot dagger in my heart, because we are the party of work. And this sense... I have to
disagree.
That, you see, and that exactly is the problem, that many people believe that we are not the party of work anymore. And this strong sense that people have that they pay into the system and they work all the hours God sends, and they don't believe that they get the support they need in return. And actually, John Cruddas has done a really important bit of work for the Labour Party about why we lost, and these are exactly the sorts of issues that he's raising, and without doubt we have to tackle that head on.
And is that convincing to you?
I believe in actions better than words. I've not seen anyone actually, since Labour and the Miliband, Organ and Brown, trying to prove that.
Well, I hope that if I'm... Sorry, Andy, I hope that if I'm elected as Labour leader, I'll convince you that we are the party of work. We will always want to help those who are struggling to find work or who are sick and disabled. And many disabled people also want the chance to work. Unfortunately, the way that the Tories' welfare, and you are trying to, as you said, improve your chances.
I had to go through all them systems under your government, paying for myself to actually go through everything. I've got dyslexia, ADHD, and come from a broken family. They are not excuses not to work.
I understand that. And I think from what you've said, I've heard this from many people across the country. And that is, you see, these are the sorts of issues I think as a party we should be discussing during this leadership contest, understanding why we lost people's support, how we need to change to get that back on areas like work and welfare, but also on the economy and people's taxes. And I understand In this leadership contest, we've gone very quickly to individual policies and what the candidates think about them. But I think there are bigger questions facing the Labour Party about what kind of party are we and who are we for, and how can we convince people that our values are actually the values of the British public.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to stay with another issue which has hit Labour and has meant that more people have moved over to UKIP, and that's on immigration. So I'd like to talk to Carol Youlden now, who's calling in from Golders Green in London. And you're a Labour Party member, I understand, Carol.
Yes.
So what's your question to Liz?
I'd just like to know, in the light of the figures of 2 million people now here from the EU, I'd like to know Liz Kendall's view on the freedom of movement, whether it's sustainable at this level, and also how Labour would deal with the problem at Calais with so many people crossing Europe to get to possibly enter the UK.
Carol, I think that many people are worried about what they're seeing happening in Calais, and there's two things here. On the immediate issue, the government has got to get to grips with this problem. We've known it's been happening for a long while. And, Theresa May's announcement about a secure zone for lorries and a new task force with the National Crime Agency and working with France were made some months ago and aren't even being set up till the autumn, and that action should have been taken more quickly. But the real way we're going to tackle the problem is to deal with the instability in North Africa and Libya. Many people who are crossing the Mediterranean to Italy or Greece are coming from there, and that's the real way we're going to be able to solve
That's a
the problems.
huge thing to be able to solve. And actually, the question was particularly about freedom of movement. And you're very strong pro-European, but while we're in the European Union, it becomes very difficult to restrict freedom of movement, doesn't it?
And I support freedom of movement within Europe. There are many people from this country who also go and live and work and study in other countries. But I think we need to do more to ensure that people in this country have the skills they need to get jobs. I was down in the Medway towns recently visiting an amazing computer game company set up by two local men, and they'd just had to employ 16 or 17 people from Eastern Europe because we don't have the skills in technology, engineering or project management, and that's going to be at the root cause of the problem.
Carol, thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's talk to Christine King now, who's calling in from the Rhondda in Wales. Perhaps put your question to Liz Kendall.
Hi. I've just been listening to this, and now I've got, and I know I'm supposed to keep this tight, but why are we blaming the unemployed and the immigrants for the problems of today? Surely this is about deregulation of markets and free trade. When I left school in the Rhondda, one of the poorest areas of this country, in the 70s, we all worked, and we all worked because there were jobs. Now there's no jobs. The solutions that we've come up with are 0-hour contracts and so-called self-employed. I'm in that position. Last week, I got diagnosed as having lung cancer. And do you know what my big issue is? I don't have no money. I don't have no sick pay. I don't have no holiday pay. And I am more angry than that than I am worried about having lung cancer. I think this is absolutely outrageous. And the Labour Party has been part of this process that's allowed this to happen. Why are we blaming the unemployed? Why are we blaming immigrants? As I say, there was only one pit left in this valleys by the 70s, and yet we all left school and we all worked. Now, the amount of youth unemployment in this area is massive.
Well, let's get Liz Kendall to respond to that.
0-hour contracts.
Let's get Liz Kendall to respond to that.
Christine, first of all, I'm so terribly sorry about your diagnosis, and I hope you're getting good support from...
The thing to be sorry about is that I've got no money.
I understand. Look, without doubt, I think one of the issues of the last Labour government is we were probably too cavalier about the consequences of globalisation, that it opens up many opportunities for some people, but too many people in too many parts of the country are left behind. And we need to have a credible strategy for creating jobs and opportunities in parts of the country like the Rhondda. And I think that is about, firstly, making sure you've got the infrastructure you need there, backing great businesses, focusing on getting the skills we need to the future. I am desperate for us to remain part of the EU because because I think jobs, trade and export, Wales would really suffer if we pulled out of the EU. But we need a big change in the economy. Still, over the last Parliament, half of the growth was seen in London and the South East, and that's not right. And that is one of the reasons why I think we've got to get more control and responsibility over skills, transport, education and work programmes out of Westminster and Whitehall and down to not just to Wales, but to the Welsh Assembly, but down to local communities too, because that is the only way we're going to create those jobs of the future.
Christine, thank you very much indeed for your call. And as Liz Kendall said, our sympathies about that diagnosis. Well, we've certainly covered a wide range of issues. Our thanks very much indeed to Liz Kendall. And we'll also be taking your calls and putting them to Jeremy Corbyn on Wednesday and Yvette Cooper on Thursday. Of course, we had Andy Burnham last week.